The millionaire's autistic son was out of control until the maid did the impossible. A sharp scream pierced the silence. It wasn't the kind of scream you hear on a normal day. It was pure panic, raw and unfiltered, the kind that tightens your chest the moment it hits your ears. Rosa Morales, 25, knelt on the polished tile floor, scrubbing away her first stain of the morning. Her body froze. The scream came from upstairs. Without thinking, Rosa tossed the rag aside and ran. Her cheap sneakers thudded against the wooden stairs as she climbed them two at a time, heart racing, a heavy feeling sinking deep in her chest. The bedroom door was wide open. Inside, a little boy curled into himself on the floor, banging his head against the wall over and over in a frantic, painful rhythm. No words, just raw energy. His small hands clutched his ears, eyes squeezed shut, cheeks flushed, soaked in tears. Liam. He looked no older than 5. Small frame, soft, curly brown hair. He hit his head again and again, and Rosa feared he might seriously hurt himself. Her heart broke. She knew this. She had lived this, loved this. Rosa dropped to her knees, slowly, quietly, careful not to startle him. She didn't touch him, didn't speak. She just stayed close and started to sing. A soft lullaby, old, gentle, a little sad, the one her grandmother used to sing to her and her little brother, the one who had autism. Rosa's voice was barely more than a whisper, calm, unrushed. She simply sang. No one said anything, but something quietly magical unfolded. Liam began to slow. His hands loosened from his ears. The sobs turned to shallow, shaky breaths. Eyes still shut, but his body started to soften. She kept singing, the notes wrapping around him like arms. Liam started to rock gently to the rhythm. No more banging, just the rise and fall of his breath and a fragile, healing silence. Rosa stayed still, a sound behind her. She turned. Daniel Whitmore, mid-30s, shirt half untucked, tie loose, hair a mess, panic written all over his face. He stood in the doorway, stunned by what he saw. His mouth opened slightly. No words came out. In 5 years, no one had calmed Liam like this. Not nurses, not therapists, not even his biological mother. Just a housekeeper, singing in a whisper. Daniel stepped inside slowly, eyes glued to his son. Liam was now still, leaning against the wall, eyes shut. Rosa looked up at the man. Their eyes met. "Who are you?" he asked quietly. Rosa stood, wiping her hands on her uniform pants. "Rosa Morales, sir. Today's my first day. I'm the housekeeper." Daniel was still processing. What did you do?" Her voice was barely audible. "I just sang, sir. My little brother used to be like this. I learned from him." Silence settled in. Daniel looked back at his son, still breathing softly, peaceful, eyes closed. He turned to Rosa and gave a slow nod. "Thank you." Rosa bowed her head, said nothing more. She walked out quietly, down the stairs, her legs shaking beneath her. Her hands were still damp with sweat. She didn't fully understand what had just happened, but she knew one thing. Today was a day she would never forget. Daniel Whitmore stood frozen in the doorway, as if his feet had fused to the floor. In front of him, his son, his own child who no therapist or specialist could ever reach during moments like this, was now sitting quietly, breathing softly, cheek resting against the cool wall. And all because of a housekeeper, a stranger who had only just started work that very morning. He had never seen anything like it. Daniel took a cautious step forward and sat on the edge of the bed, careful not to disturb the calm. Liam's eyes were still shut, but the tension in his face had melted away. He was breathing gently now, hands resting in his lap, his small body leaning softly into the wall. Rosa stood at the exit, her hands still trembling. She turned, about to leave the room, when Daniel's voice, low, strained, stopped her. "Wait!" She turned back and froze. He stared at her for a long moment, as if trying to find the right words. Where did you learn to do that?" Rosa swallowed. Her voice was calm, but her eyes betrayed memories that hadn't quite healed. "My little brother. He used to be like that, autistic, sensitive to sound, light, touch. Everything overwhelmed him. He had meltdowns just like Liam." Daniel gave a small nod. His face softened, and the sharpness in his eyes gave way to something else, something quieter, sadder. "I never know what to do when he's like this," he said, his gaze still fixed on his son. "I've hired nurses, therapists, specialists. No one has ever done what you just did. No one." Rosa didn't know what to say. Deep inside, she understood. What she had learned hadn't come from books or classrooms. It had come from life, from loss, from years beside her brother's bed. "Sometimes," she said gently, "what these kids need is someone who's not afraid to be near them." Daniel nodded again, this time slower. He stepped closer to Rosa. "Thank you," he said again, more softly. "You have no idea what that means." Rosa lowered her head, offering a small, bittersweet smile. Then she turned and quietly left the room, her heart pounding in her chest. Behind her, Liam remained still, his cheek pressed to the wall, the storm that had gripped him now fading into the distance. But for Daniel and for Rosa, something had shifted, and though neither said it out loud, they both felt it. Rosa returned downstairs with her mop and bucket, but her hands still trembled slightly. She sat back down, resuming the chore she had abandoned earlier, but she was no longer the same woman she had been an hour ago. In her mind, Liam's image replayed over and over, the terror in his eyes, the soundless sobs, and the stillness that came when he finally leaned against the wall, listening to her song. She didn't fully understand why, but that feeling, being needed, made her heart stir. Rosa Morales, 25 years old, born and raised in the outskirts of the city, in a rundown neighborhood people preferred to forget. Her father left when she was little. Her mother, Luz, had worked as a hospital janitor for over 20 years, until a stage 3 ovarian cancer diagnosis ended that. Rosa started working at 18, shelving her dream of studying special education. Since then, she had cleaned countless houses, served countless families, most of whom never bothered to ask her name. They simply called her Hey. Low wages, no benefits. No one saw her as a real person. But she never gave up, for her mother, for her family, and for Mateo, her little brother. Mateo was born different. Mild autism, sensory processing disorder. Loud sounds made him panic. Bright lights caused him to scream. Even the hum of a vacuum cleaner could send him into full distress. At just 11 years old, Rosa took over his care after school. She learned how to read the signs of an oncoming meltdown, how to dim the lights, how to say nothing when words were too much, and when to sing gently, so softly it felt like a hug. No one taught her. But love doesn't need a degree. Mateo passed away at 12 from complications of pneumonia. Rosa never forgot that day. A part of her died with him. And this morning, when she saw Liam curled in the corner, hands over ears, head banging against the wall, it all came rushing back like a film reel stuck on rewind. Maybe God had brought her here for a reason. She gripped the mop handle tightly, took a deep breath, and kept cleaning. But deep in her heart, one thing was now clearer than ever. If Liam needed her, she would not walk away. Even if she was just the housekeeper, she would not look the other way. Since that morning, something had shifted, not loud, not dramatic, but quiet, deep, and seemingly irreversible. Liam began to show up. He didn't run, didn't talk, didn't smile. He just appeared. Every morning, while Rosa cleaned the kitchen, he would stand at the doorway, clutching an old plastic dinosaur toy, one leg missing. He never spoke. He just watched her. Rosa never asked questions. She didn't look at him directly. She simply kept working and singing. At first, just gentle lullabies, barely above a whisper. Then slowly, old Spanish folk songs her grandmother used to sing. And one day, she heard a soft rustling behind her. Liam was sorting books. He sat on the floor, pulling old comic books from a low shelf, arranging them by color: red, blue, yellow. Rosa said nothing, but her eyes stung with emotion. Another day, while sweeping the backyard, he quietly placed a large yellow leaf on her broom and walked away. Rosa picked it up, folded it carefully, and slipped it into her pocket. Each of Liam's small gestures was like a signal, as if he were trying to speak in his own language. Daniel began to notice. He often saw his son standing near doorways when Rosa was working, never entering, never speaking, just being there, as if her presence created a safe zone, a circle of trust. One afternoon, Rosa was humming softly as she wiped down the patio doors when a low voice came from behind her. "You know, Liam's never approached anyone like that before." She turned. It was Daniel. He didn't sound amused or curious, just quietly surprised. Rosa offered a small smile. "Kids like Liam, they feel more than we think, but the world, it's just too loud for them sometimes." Daniel was quiet for a while. His eyes followed his son, who was now gently sweeping the floor with a toy broom. "Thank you," he said, for the third time since meeting her. But this time, there was something warmer in his tone, softer, closer. And from that day forward, it wasn't just Liam who quietly stepped into Rosa's world. Daniel did too. And so the days passed, quiet but full of quiet change. Liam didn't speak more, but his eyes no longer held the same fear. He began to seek Rosa, not with words, but with presence. A glance, a leaf gently placed on the table, or simply standing close while she sang. Daniel noticed it all, and though he never said it aloud, he began to understand. In his son's chaotic world, Rosa had become a steady anchor. But the world outside wasn't so simple. And those who belonged to that world, wealthy, powerful, and carrying the weight of old prejudices, were about to step into the story. Saturday evening brought a strange stillness to the Whitmore house. Rosa was arranging flowers in the dining room when she heard the sound of a car outside. A sleek black sedan pulled up in the driveway. From it stepped an elegant older woman wrapped in a cashmere coat and wearing gold-rimmed glasses. Margaret Whitmore, Daniel's mother. One glance told Rosa everything she needed to know. This was a woman used to being in control, not easily pleased, and, most of all, not one to trust outsiders. Daniel rushed out to greet her. Liam stayed behind him, peeking nervously at the refined woman. Rosa quietly stepped back, trying to make herself invisible. Dinner was set beautifully. The table was arranged with precision, soft candlelight dancing across the silverware. Rosa stood silently in the background. "Who's that girl?" Margaret asked, not bothering to lower her voice. "That's Rosa, Mom. She's been helping with Liam," Daniel replied. Margaret frowned. "A housekeeper? So now this house hires lullaby singers for children?" The air grew thick. Rosa remained still, keeping her expression neutral. "She's been good for Liam," Daniel said firmly. "He's calmer when she's around." Margaret gave a short laugh, setting her cutlery down before turning toward Rosa. "How long have you worked here?" "This is my second week, ma'am," Rosa replied softly. "Well, and in just 2 weeks, my son believes you're better than trained professionals? Fascinating." Daniel's voice tightened. "Mom?" "Don't you find it odd?" Margaret interrupted. "A housekeeper, no qualifications, suddenly becomes the only person the boy trusts." Who knows what someone like her really wants? Each word cut like a knife. Rosa stood still, her hands clenched behind her back, but she didn't react. She simply bowed her head and said quietly, "I don't want anything, ma'am. I just want him to feel safe." A silence fell over the room. Then Margaret gave a dismissive chuckle. "Safe? How sweet." Dinner continued in uncomfortable quiet. Later, after everyone had gone upstairs, Rosa returned to clear the table. As she moved to pick up her napkin, she noticed a small piece of paper tucked gently onto her chair. A child's drawing, messy but full of meaning. A long-haired woman standing beside a little boy. They were holding hands. Above them, a heart. Rosa brought a hand to her chest. Liam? No words. No defense needed. She knew, at least to that little boy. She was someone he trusted. From the staircase, Daniel stood silently, watching as Rosa carefully held the child's drawing in both hands like it was something precious. He saw her press it to her chest, eyes glistening, but no tears fell. The picture was simple, even clumsy, but it carried a quiet truth, a trust from Liam that was rarely given. Something tightened in Daniel's chest, not from sorrow, but from something deeper. For the first time, he didn't see Rosa as the help. He saw her as part of this home. But peace, as Daniel was starting to learn, was often temporary when the past hasn't truly let go. And just as the quiet began to feel like home, a door he thought was sealed forever creaked open once more. That afternoon, Daniel had just picked Liam up from school when he saw an envelope neatly placed at the front door. No return address, just a folded sheet of paper inside, a court summons. Daniel's grip tightened. He recognized the name immediately. Vanessa Reed, his ex-wife. It had been 2 years since she vanished from Liam's life. No phone calls, no birthday cards, not even a text. The last time Daniel saw her was in the divorce court when she coldly refused custody, saying, "I can't live chained to a sick child." And now she was back, demanding custody. Daniel didn't need to guess. She didn't miss Liam. She missed the money. That evening, while Rosa fed Liam dinner, Daniel sat silently in his office, staring at the papers. The anger in his chest burned cold, not fear of losing his son, but disgust. How could a mother walk away, then come back as if nothing had happened? A few days later, Vanessa showed up, as if she never left. She walked into the Whitmore estate like a celebrity fallen from the red carpet. Tight dress, designer sunglasses, perfectly styled golden hair. But beneath the polish, her eyes were sharp, her smile insincere. "No hello?" she said as Daniel opened the door. "What are you doing here?" he replied flatly. "Visiting my son. I am his mother, remember?" she said sweetly, like saccharin laced with venom. Liam hid behind Rosa, refusing to approach his birth mother. When Vanessa reached for him, he pulled away, clutching Rosa's hand. Vanessa paused, then looked down. "And who's this?" she asked, lips tightening. "She's helping take care of Liam," Daniel replied curtly. "A housekeeper?" Vanessa's eyes narrowed. "So you've left our child in the hands of a stranger?" The very next day, Vanessa filed an official motion in court requesting full custody. She hired a lawyer, issued threats. Worse, she hired a private investigator to follow Rosa and began spreading rumors that Daniel was sleeping with the maid to distract from his failures as a father. Then came the media appearances. Vanessa cried on camera, spinning tales about a mother torn from her child by a cold husband and an opportunistic woman. Daniel and Rosa were suddenly in the center of a storm. Unknown cars parked outside their gate. Tabloid blogs started dropping Daniel's name. Rosa stopped leaving the house after work. Her mother back home began receiving questions from nosy neighbors. Daniel had faced public scrutiny before. He was a known figure in business. But Rosa hadn't. She was a regular woman, and in her eyes now, he saw pain. One night, Daniel caught her packing a bag. "Where are you going?" "She said if I stay, you'll lose him," Rosa whispered. "I won't let that happen." "Rosa, you don't understand. Liam needs you. I need you. Don't let her win." She looked at him. 1 second. 2. Then nodded softly, though fear still lingered in her gaze. She wasn't afraid of Vanessa. She was afraid of losing Liam. And more than that, she was afraid of her own heart, because for the first time in a long time, she was beginning to feel something dangerously close to love. Love, no matter how deep, can become fragile under the weight of outside pressure, especially when lies begin to masquerade as truth. Daniel started receiving official notices from the court, warnings that he might lose custody of Liam unless he could prove the child's environment was stable, healthy, and free from conflict of interest. His attorney was blunt. "If Vanessa can prove you're romantically involved with the housekeeper, the same woman caring for your son, it could be seen as unprofessional and manipulative by the court." Daniel sat in silence. Through the window, he watched Rosa sitting with Liam on the porch, gently brushing his hair under the soft afternoon sun. He knew his heart had begun to fall for her. But what about Liam? What about custody? And the media storm still raging outside? That evening, just after Rosa finished setting the table, Daniel walked into the kitchen, his face unusually solemn. "Rosa," he said quietly, "starting tomorrow, I think you should limit your interaction with Liam when I'm not around." Rosa looked up, frozen. "Why?" "Because I don't want to give Vanessa more ammunition." Silence. The words weren't long, but they cut straight through the fragile trust between them. Rosa nodded. "I understand." She didn't ask anything more. She didn't cry. But the light in her eyes faded in that moment. In the days that followed, Rosa still came to work, still cleaned, still cooked. But she no longer sang, no longer sat beside Liam. She pulled back, becoming exactly what her job title said, a housekeeper, nothing more. Liam didn't understand. He began waking up in the night, irritable, refusing to eat. One afternoon, when Rosa walked past him without even a glance, he screamed and began hitting his head against a chair. Daniel rushed to him, cradling his son, heartbreaking. He called for Rosa. She turned, standing in the doorway, hands clenched, eyes full of hesitation. They looked at each other for a long, long time. But Rosa didn't move. She turned away, disappearing quietly beyond the door. As the distance between them grew and love was pushed to the sidelines, the law, with all its logic and flaws, stepped in. And this time it was Liam who paid the price. Some decisions may seem right, legal, fair, but they can still shatter the heart. And sometimes it takes losing what you love most to realize who your true family really is. By court order, Daniel was required to let Vanessa take Liam home for the weekend. It sounded fair on paper, but deep down he knew. He was signing his son into a nightmare. Saturday morning was gray and cold. Liam sat in the car, face blank, clutching his one-legged plastic dinosaur. Rosa stood on the porch, forcing a smile that never reached her eyes. When the car pulled away, the boy turned back once. No words, no tears, only a lost, aching stare that burned into her soul. The house was too quiet after that. Rosa cleaned in silence, but every corner felt empty, lifeless. Daniel sat in his office, phone in hand, unsure who to call, because there was no one who could ease the ache in his chest except Rosa, and the little boy, now gone. 36 hours later, the nightmare arrived. When Vanessa brought Liam back, Daniel was waiting at the door. The child didn't run toward him. He just stood there, dirty, pale, eyes bloodshot, lips cracked, faint bruises marking his neck. He wouldn't sleep, barely ate, Vanessa said flatly, annoyance in her tone. There's only so much I can do." Daniel froze. For a moment, rage threatened to burst out. But then he saw it, Liam trembling, shrinking behind Rosa, and in that instant he finally understood what his heart had been trying to tell him all along. The boy didn't need the mother who gave him life. He needed the woman who gave him love. Rosa knelt, opening her arms. "Come here, Liam." He ran to her, breaking down into raw, uncontrollable sobs, the kind that come from somewhere too deep to name. He clung to her, face buried in her shoulder, shaking as if the world would collapse the moment she let go. Rosa held him. No words, just warmth. She carried him to the bathroom, ran warm water, and began to sing. Her voice trembled at first, low and fragile, but soon it wrapped the room in calm. The same lullaby as before, the same song that had once stopped a storm, now carried a power beyond comfort. It was healing? Daniel stood at the doorway, hand gripping the frame, eyes wet. He listened to the water, the melody, the fragile sound of his son's breathing returning to normal. When Rosa emerged, holding Liam wrapped in a towel, Daniel couldn't speak. The boy was asleep, peaceful, weightless, as if the nightmare had never touched him. Rosa sat beside the bed, brushing Liam's damp hair. Daniel sat across from her, his voice breaking. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I thought I was protecting him, but I only made him suffer." Rosa looked up, not angry, just tired, soft, endlessly understanding. "Sometimes," she murmured, "loving a child doesn't mean holding on tight. It means standing beside them, no matter what." Daniel nodded, tears finally falling. He looked at the two before him, Rosa gentle and steady, and Liam breathing softly against her chest. And in that moment, he knew. Rosa wasn't just the housekeeper. She was the mother his son had been waiting for all along. After that night, Daniel hesitated no more. He had seen it clearly. Liam didn't just need protection, he needed to be loved the right way. And if Daniel had to fight the whole world to keep that, he would. Daniel hired a private investigator, not to seek revenge on Vanessa, but to reveal her true nature. Within days, they gathered a stack of evidence. Vanessa frequently left Liam home alone for short periods. She visited bars and parties late into the night. Police had filed public disturbance reports against her. And worse, a prior complaint for neglecting a minor. Each report, each photo, tore at the image of the devoted mother Vanessa was trying to sell to the court. But what troubled Daniel most was Rosa. He knew calling her to testify meant throwing her into the fire. Vanessa would attack her, mock her background, her status, her lack of formal training. He asked gently, concern in his voice, "You don't have to do this, not if you're not ready." Rosa simply nodded. "I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it for Liam." From that day on, she began preparing with Daniel's lawyer. At first, Rosa stumbled, nervous, shaking when asked harsh mock questions. But as days passed, her voice steadied. Her gaze grew stronger. She learned how to face contempt with truth, learned to speak of what she'd seen, with love and conviction, not fear. One afternoon, after a difficult session, the lawyer looked at her and smiled. "You're not just a witness, you're the heart of this case." And Daniel knew he wasn't going into this battle alone. And then the day came, the place where masks fall away, where truth speaks loudest if the heart is honest enough. The custody hearing for Liam had begun. The courtroom was large, lit with cold, sterile lights. Daniel squeezed Rosa's hand as they walked in, eyes scanning for the little boy sitting in the back corner with a temporary guardian. Liam sat still, clutching his worn dinosaur toy, his eyes vacant. Vanessa entered like a star on stage. Elegant dress, carefully curled hair, a composed face. She radiated the image of a perfect mother. She smiled softly at the jury, placing a hand over her heart, as if to show how deeply she loved her son. Her attorney spoke first, confident, convincing, accusing Daniel of being emotionally unstable and compromised by an inappropriate relationship with the housekeeper. Then came Rosa's turn to take the stand. Tension filled the room. Vanessa's lawyer attacked fast. "You have no formal education. You live in the same house as the child's father. Who do you think you are, believing you understand a neurodivergent child better than his biological mother?" Rosa tried to remain composed, but the words hit deeper than she expected, sharper than any insult she'd ever heard. She'd heard whispers before, seen the stares, but this was a courtroom, and the judgment was loud. Her voice broke, tears streamed down her cheeks. She couldn't hold it anymore. "I'm not using anyone," she said, her voice trembling. "I'm not wealthy. I don't have degrees. But I know how to love a child without expecting anything back." She placed a hand on her heart. "I love Liam, not for money, not for status, but because he deserves to be loved." Silence fell, and then the back door creaked open. Liam entered, led gently by a court officer. He stepped in hesitantly, eyes darting across the room. When he saw Vanessa, he recoiled, clutching the officer's hand. Vanessa smiled, holding out her arms. "Liam, come to Mommy." He shook his head, confused, as if unsure who that word even belonged to. Then he turned. He saw Rosa, and like a spark ignited in his chest, Liam broke free, running straight to her, tears shining in his eyes, and cried out, for the first time in months, "Mama!" The courtroom went still. Daniel froze. The jury didn't move. Vanessa stood shocked, her hand still outstretched midair. Rosa caught Liam in her arms, sobbing, but this time not from pain. This time from knowing that in the coldest room of all, a child's heart had spoken the loudest truth. No more arguments, no more defense needed. In the moment Liam said, "Mama," the entire courtroom had heard the only testimony that mattered, his heart. 1 week later, the final verdict was delivered. The judge, firm yet compassionate, spoke clearly. "The court hereby grants full custody of Liam Whitmore to Mr. Daniel Whitmore. Mrs. Vanessa Reed is denied visitation rights indefinitely, pending further court review." No applause. But none was needed. Joy doesn't always shout. Sometimes it speaks through the silent tears streaming down Daniel's face. Rosa sat beside him, almost not believing it, until Daniel turned, took her hand, and pulled her into a tight embrace. Liam looked up at them and smiled. Then he whispered, softly, but enough to melt every heart in the room, "Home." There was no need for labels, no more barriers. Only a family, built not by blood, but by love, acceptance, and courage. There was no music, no fireworks, just the soft creak of the front door as they stepped inside, together for the first time without fear. That afternoon, everything returned to where it belonged. Daniel, Rosa, and Liam went home, without fear, without conditions. That old house, once just a shelter, had truly become a home. Every corner seemed to whisper, "You're safe now." And from that moment, a new chapter began. Not the end, but the beginning of something real. 1 year later, Rosa sat in a small lecture hall at the local university. She was studying special education, hoping to help children like Liam, not just with her heart, but with knowledge. Daniel waited outside her classes with coffee and that same quiet smile. One breezy afternoon, he knelt down in the backyard, the very place where Rosa once sang lullabies to Liam. "Will you marry me?" he asked. Rosa laughed through tears and said yes. They had walked through fire, judgment, fear, and the ache of almost losing everything. But here they were, not just surviving, but choosing joy. They held a simple wedding in that garden. Liam wore a tiny suit as ring-bearer. He stood tall, then suddenly shouted, "Mama's the prettiest in the world!" Laughter filled the air. A few months later, a baby girl was born. Rosa held her in her arms, Liam beside her, eyes shining. This family wasn't perfect. There were still sleepless nights and rushed mornings. But the house was full of laughter, lullabies, and arms that held each other through storms and through sunshine. They were a real family, not because they were flawless, but because they chose love.